Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by again. When I arrived in Panama for the first time in February of 2004, I found an airport that was perfectly ordinary, perfectly decent airport for a developing nation, the kind of nation I've been working in for many years, and one similar to those in smaller cities in the United States. So perfectly acceptable. And in fact, I got confused, a little lost, didn't know what I was doing there, didn't speak Spanish. And a tourism policeman, they have them, came up, asked me what the problem was in English. I told him, and he helped me get it all straightened out with a smile on his face, and that was that, and sent me on my way. So I had a very good impression when I arrived. I got in the cab, went into town, and saw the city. It was an ordinary city. There was nothing particularly special about it. This is a business country. It's a business city. It really wasn't set up to impress tourists or people from outside. It was meant for business. So it's all right. I've lived in cities before, not a problem. But my primary interest was getting up into the countryside, going out and living out there, where it was more rural, where it was more open to nature and so forth and what have you. However, I couldn't do that immediately. I was still the CEO and part owner of a corporation, small business up in the United States. So I would spend a month in Panama City and then a month up there, or 3 weeks here and 3 weeks there. That went on for several years. I just had to do that. I couldn't walk away from it. By the same token, I was trying to get established here. One thing I was trying to do is look for business here for my company, which worked with economic development for developing nations, only to discover that really Panama didn't need our type of support as much as other nations, and it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense here. They were already beginning to make progress. I also was fortunate enough to get to know some people, and two very large corporations, their representatives shared with me their studies of Panama City, and this is 12, 13 years ago now, when they were looking for a new regional office. And they were looking at places from Santiago in Chile right on up to Mexico City and everything in between. These reports that they had finished, and I received in confidence, and never will mention the names, even now, years and years later, over a decade, because that's what I said I wouldn't, and I won't. But I was impressed by the fact that even in those early days, Panama City came out number one on both lists as the best place for an office. Not that far ahead of some other cities, but ahead of them. And I went through and I saw the amazing amount of detail that these professional teams who are hired to do this, well, they actually are not hired, they're part of the large corporations team. They go in to a nation and they make a very thorough investigation, and they look into everything under the sun. Because they know they're not just bringing down their employees, but their employees' families. So they have to look out for everything, from shopping to the quality of schools to recreational activities and all sorts of things. Very, very thorough, most impressive. And I was most impressed by the fact that Panama City outranked the other cities at that time. And I hadn't found it all particularly special, but certainly satisfactory and sufficient. Nonetheless, I was headed out to the countryside. So that continued for 3 or 4 years until such time as I finally completed my work up in the north. We chose to close down the firm, no longer necessary, and I came down and finally began to live here on a full-time basis, really in my mind around 2008, although I had been here half the time for the 4 years prior to that. Now people actually believed I was staying, however, and I got more and more involved with the country and watched as it began, or as it was in these early years of a terrific development, a financial growth that was way out in front of everybody else in the region, including the U.S. and Canada, I might add. So in the face of that, I've seen that happen in other nations. 50 years of running around the world doing this sort of stuff, and yeah, I've seen nations get fortunate and suddenly have more money coming in than they had ever expected. And I've also seen them mess it up and have all sorts of problems, and then years later still be trying to sort things out. In Panama, I saw governments really trying to do the intelligent thing, and I was just very impressed with that. And the city began to change. Now, people come down now, years later, and I am now living in a city that is dramatically different than the one I arrived in 2004. I can't even begin to tell you how different it is. I look at photographs taken back in that time, and it's just highly amusing. It's just everything has changed, and it's changed for the better, and in recent years particularly. However, most people running on images they've collected in the 20th century, and they get from here and there and various types of websites up in the web, they get an impression that Panama City is just a dirty, busy, crazy place, and they too come down, they arrive at the airport, they come into the center of town as I did, they get a hotel room here as I did when I first came down, because they're inexpensive right at the moment, until our convention center opens, when we'll begin to see prices rise. But for now, they're very inexpensive, and they stay here for a day or two. And occasionally I meet them here to talk to them face to face. Occasionally I'm asked to speak to a group or whatever, and I mention Panama City, or I'm asked to talk about it, and I just sort of run through it in a standard approach. It's a big city. It has a lot of amenities, blah blah blah, but no one's really interested. They're convinced that they're not going to like the city, that it's too expensive for them, that like the downtown area, it's all noise and traffic and busy and so on, which is a sign actually of a very dynamic economy, and it's nothing that upsets me, but that's not what they want to live in. So they don't think of the city beyond that, because then 2-3 days later, if not earlier, they get in a rental car, occasionally in a van, a tour van, and they head off west up the coast, past the area that is very well known to many coming down as Coronado. Coronado is actually just one small piece of that beach area that runs west of the city and the Pacific coast. And then sometimes they move on from there to the far west. One area that's very popular, most Americans and Canadians refer to it as Boquete, but it's Boquete. And you will learn to say Boquete quickly enough here. And it's a lovely area up in the mountains. They have coffee plantations and much cooler temperatures and so forth. And they're convinced that this is where they want to live, either on the coast itself or up in the mountains. And the city's given no attention whatsoever. But we've been having a problem. And the problem is that it's been very popular, but we've had sort of an odd occurrence to most people. We have right now a buyer's market everywhere, in the city, along the coast, and in the expat areas of the far west. And it's a buyer's market in great part, not because of a bubble. It's not because thousands of people come down and keep pushing the prices up higher and higher. It's because the real estate industry here, particularly along the coast, have so focused their energies and efforts in that one area, convinced that people have to be within view of the ocean in order to be interested in buying anything. They've built so much, they've overbuilt, and now they're overpriced. I mean, people are surprised when I tell them that an ordinary price, an average price for a square meter of land on the coast itself in that area can run $1,000, which in acreage terms is $4 million an acre. And that just astonishes them. And that's not the lowest price, or pardon me, it's not the highest price. You can pay up to $5 million for the equivalent of an acre, or $1,250 for a square meter, and so forth. Even if you got it for half price, I mean, $2 million for an acre, it's so expensive. And it's so expensive because the developer community here has they just go with what has worked in the past. It's not uncommon, especially in rapidly growing real estate markets that weren't prepared for and don't have a long history of dealing with such growth. When it happens, they all run in the same direction and do the same thing because it's working. So why should they mess with that? Why should they try something different? So the result has been that I get emails now from people driving up the coast, members of Retirement Wave, who write me and say, Bob, I went up the coast, the Pacific coast, I looked at Coronado, I looked at the areas around there, and I can get a place for less money that's every bit as nicer in Florida. In fact, a lot less money. So why should I buy it here in Panama? That's a good question. I mentioned this to real estate people here, and they nod their heads. They understand this now. But, of course, you come to another nation frequently for reasons other than simply the cost of housing. But when it gets so out of whack, you're being expected to come up with $400,000, $600,000, $800,000 for a condo somewhere along the ocean. It's out of hand for the overwhelming majority of people who are coming down, people like yourself, looking for a place to buy. So in the last 10 years, we've shifted from Americans and Canadians, for example, because they've been the large numbers throughout this whole time period. Instead of almost all of them buying, now the majority of them rent because they cannot afford to buy. So they rent. Now, I understand that. For a variety of reasons, the rentals sometimes can be quite attractive. I mean, basically, many of the people who first came down and bought out in the countryside, they paid much lower prices at that time. They came down during the housing bubble in the north, so they had more money with them, and they were getting 20-year property tax exemptions. So they're able to rent it out, but if you want to buy it, suddenly the price is substantial. I will leave it at that. So we've got an overbuilt, overpriced areas in the country. Now that will eventually sort itself out, but for reasons I discuss in other videos, and I will continue to talk about here, we are going through a period, I don't know, 6 months, a year, or whatever, when it's going to be a buyer's market. It's not like you're going to get 30, 40% off or something of that sort. We're not in a collapsing bubble. We're just in an unfortunate situation due to a lot of factors that I'm not even going to bother talking about. I can talk about them in other videos that were unexpected and so on, but are temporary. So I expect that to continue throughout this high season, which is the cold winter months in the north and in Europe, and later into next year, maybe beyond for a while. But I also expect it to turn around. In the meantime, I have people coming down. Now, if you've seen the survey of Retirement Wave members, that's some 673 filled out in detail, bless their hearts, in the middle of their summer vacations this year, to give me an idea of what it was they were looking for. You'll find that their budgets are not in, well, the 400,000 and above crowd is 8%, and that's good. But even they are going to find problems in some parts of the coast. So there's a great deal of demand, but it's not being met by a supply that fits the budgets of the demand, so it boils down to it. And that, if you don't have a copy, you have no idea what I'm talking about. If you go to retirementwave.com, it's free, it's completely free, and you go to the reports section, you can get a copy of the results of that survey of people like yourself and what they were looking for, how much money they had to spend, and so on. Okay. Meantime, as the years pass by, this city improves more and more and more. There used to be a horrible odor that came in off the bay because raw sewage was being dumped in the bay back in 2004, 5, and so on. But everybody knew that here, but the money had not yet been in place to do something about it. Very expensive for a nation like Panama 15 years ago. But with the increasing economic growth, the money became available. They went right to work on that. We now have a state-of-the-art sewage treatment center, and that odor has been gone for years. I can't even remember the last time I smelled it. That's gone. Roads have been built and streets improved and intersections changed and tunnels and what have you all over the city over the last few years. We now have not only taxi cabs, we have ride sharing with Uber and things that helps the transportation system greatly. We have the first metro line is operating very successfully, very popular. The second one be finished, or at least it should be beginning to function at the end of 2018 and then fully functional in early 2019. Then the third one will be under construction. So we're really expanding the facilities here. The shopping, the availability of anything and everything is so much better than it was 10 or 15 years ago. The mayor's office in the last few years, credit where credit's due, has worked very hard to develop what they call revitalization plans, and they're going into neighborhoods and spending some money they literally closed down half the streets and what have you, and they redo the neighborhood. In the streets, the sidewalks and everything, they bury the telephone and electric lines that have been so ugly and for years now. And neighborhoods are literally revitalized. They do, even though they were good before, now they're better. And so people are very happy with that. We have a new neighborhood now, a big one, that's about to undergo that revitalization program. So all around me, I'm seeing continuous improvements in the city itself and what is available, knowing that 99% of the people who come down here will get out that plane, come into the city, leave the city, and go up the coast, and will never have seen more than 2% of the city, if that. They have no idea how big it is, how it spreads out, and what other areas there are that don't look anything like downtown and don't have that same traffic snarl, and it can be very beautiful and so forth. And with all the transportation improvements and with the revitalization and just the arrival of people with money who are happy to buy things that improve the local economy, it's getting to a point. Now, I'm not interested in living in the country anymore. I'm surprised I say that. If you knew me in the U.S., you know I spent years living way out in the country, and an hour and a half commute into the city to my job. And I had every intention of doing that down here. I don't have that intention anymore. I can get out to the ocean, I can get to the mountains easily if I want to go. You can't be too far away from either one. In Panama, we're half the size of the state of Florida. We're about the size of Scotland. It's not very large. And we're a very narrow country. And so on the side, one side you have the Atlantic, the other side the Pacific. You know, in an hour's time you can go from one to the other, back and forth in the morning if you want to. You can go up and down the country in a matter of a few hours too. You can get buses. The bus system's much improved. It's a small country. It's as simple as that. So I know where the beaches are. I've been there. And I know where the mountains are. I've been there. And I know there are many people who live in both who are very happy. And I'm happy for them. And I know for others coming down, this is definitely what they want. And more power to them. However, for a lot of people, I think they're missing out. They don't have the full story any longer. And they can't get it just by shooting through the city. Now, when it comes to budgets for homes, there's no big problem finding a home $200,000 to $250,000 in the city, and there are homes under $200,000. Now, you get too low, you get below $150,000, you're going to have serious trouble finding a place that an expat is going to be really interested in living in. They exist, but they're not what they're looking for particularly. But there's a wide range available, and because the market is soft at the moment, people are willing to bargain. The challenge is, though, is the real estate agents not having as much business as they used to constantly push the more expensive condos. You come in and you say, I'm looking for something for $200,000 or less, and they show you something for $250,000 or $275,000. And they say, well, there just isn't much in your price range. Yes, there is, but they get a higher commission by selling a more expensive place, and they're under pressure from their own agency to sell up so that the agency itself can make up some of the slowness of this particular market. And it really, really frustrates members, and I don't blame them one bit. I get very, very disturbed by it. And I see the newsletters come out from some of the real estate agencies here, and they show properties at $400,000, $500,000, $700,000, $800,000, $1.2 million in one instance, and that's not that uncommon. This is crazy. The city has a lot available, and that's why we decided to set up this market match program, which is free to you. And you can read about it at retirementwave.com. And I've mentioned it in videos here. I'll be mentioning it again. And we've been working on this over the last few weeks. It's one reason you haven't heard as much from me. And taking a careful look at what's happening. And I'm pleased to say that we've got alternatives out there that are decent, very decent places. And you might be surprised. Now, but people say, aren't they condos? I don't want a condo. Well, all right. If you don't want a condo, you don't want a condo. And a standalone home is going to be extremely expensive in the city or in the suburbs, or at least the good suburbs and so on. Even the middle-level suburbs are going to be expensive. So why a condo? Well, I used to feel the same way too. If you'd seen some of the homes I've lived in the past, you'd understand that. I wasn't a condo person. But I like the condos, and I've grown used to it because now the city has so much to offer. And I can go places and I can see things and do things that I couldn't 10, 15 years ago. But in a condo, I don't have to have a car. Now that's a big fat piece of change right out of the budget right there. I don't have to worry about. And I don't. And I haven't had a car since I arrived here, and I'm not about to buy one. And if I have to, I'd rent one or whatever. But no, I usually end up going out with friends who are visiting somewhere. I'll go along too, or as I say, if need be, I'll rent one. And I just save a pile of money, and I don't have all the hassle of urban traffic. It was tough in the early years because I had to find a taxi, and that could be difficult, very difficult. And then among them find a driver that I really liked and really trusted to be there on time and do the right job, but he wasn't always available, only available part of the time. It was pretty frustrating. But now, with Uber and other ride-sharing programs, with the Metro and so forth, that isn't such a problem. So the condo becomes more reasonable in terms of being able to get places. I like the fact that the security and the maintenance is not my problem. It's right here. I can walk out the door here. I can lock the door behind me. I can leave and come back a month later, and I'm not worried. Not a bit. I can 2 months later, and I'm fine. And the place will be maintained, and I won't have to worry about whether the grass is overgrown in a tropical climate taking over the house. It's really so much simpler when you have somebody else who's responsible for that. And you'll pay, and you need to know that when you check a place, that you'll have a fee you pay to the Condo Owners Association to take care of this. It very likely is also going to cover all your gas that you use for cooking, for heating, not heating, but I mean for laundry, for example, a dryer. We use gas instead of electricity because it's cheaper, and it's not uncommon for the Condo Owners Association to buy that as a bulk purchase for the whole use of the whole condo, and you pay a portion of that. That's fine. It's taken care of. Everything else, electricity, it's your business. You use it, you pay for it, and that sort of thing. But it's nice and neat. I like the fact that I do have ready access. I'm looking over here to make sure I don't miss things. I have nearby entertainment, shopping, schools if you need them, and some people do, and no question the best are here. And God forbid, if you need an excellent hospital and excellent health care, we have them. And at my age, I'm 72, hey, you never know. So it's good to have all that nearby. It's very nice. But it's a problem in one sense. It can be for many people because the neighborhood doesn't particularly interest them. It's too dull. It's too urban. The streets are just ordinary. They don't really get out. Well, there are two things to deal with that. The first is a simple one. I focus on condos that have a balcony, so you always can go outside anytime you want to directly from your apartment. But the second thing is that there are areas that do have open space. They have parks. There are pleasant places all scattered around the city that you never see when you go zipping through, that are really very pleasant, some of them exceptionally so, but you wouldn't know they're there. And a private home there with a lot and everything is going to cost you a fortune, but a condo unit is much, much more reasonable and within budget. So as it turns out, you get so much, and you can find it, say at 160, 170, 180, 190,000 in that area. We're going out and checking some next week. I mean, I know them, but I want to go back and see again the neighborhood. I'm not worried about it at all. They're small, okay, they're less expensive to furnish, and they will tend to run 60-something square meters to 95 or something, say, or 100 square meters. That's about 700 to 1,100 square feet, so they're not huge. They'd be 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. That's very common. So there is a furnishing thing, but in the city you can see a lot of variety in terms of furnishings. Some people do bring their furnishings down, which is fine. You don't have to bring much for many of them at least, to cover that much space. It's just ideal for a certain type of person that enjoys it, because you can walk out, if you can walk out, I should say, into a neighborhood that you enjoy being outside in. So that's what we're focusing on. And we're looking at places that anywhere, normally what we look for is anything between 150 and 300,000, that whole area, because there are many people who fit in there and they don't know where to go. And to find them, to check them out in regards to their proximity to services and really the comfort of living there and so on. If you're in that category, in that range of prices, yes, there are places. There definitely are. Your basic problem is you can go into an internet site and you can go to a real estate site for Panama City, but you don't know the neighborhoods. So you don't know El Barrio from San Francisco, you don't know El Cangrejo from Bella Vista. I mean, you don't know. How could you? You're not here. So you don't get any sense at all of whether this is the neighborhood is where you want to be. We know that. I know that from my own experience. So we give as much weight to the neighborhood, if not more, than we do for the condo itself, as long as the condo is a decent one, is well constructed, and offers value for the money. After that, it's the neighborhood that's going to convince us. So what I'm trying to get to is I finally at a point, I've not spoken like this in all these years until this year, in just the last few months, when I've seen the market soft. I know it's that the probability is very high that this is not a long-term slowness. It's going to speed up again. It's going to recover. It's going to get moving. But it's not going to for a while, so it will be a buyer's market. So there is some negotiation space here. And yet people just shoot through town, and I say nothing, because I don't want to hurt the feelings of the people who live out there now and who are my good friends, and I appreciate that they are happy there and they enjoy it. And I don't want people to feel who are headed outside that suddenly it's not a place to go. It's just it's going to be somewhat more challenging in the price sense, and you may indeed have to end up renting initially in the hopes that prices will eventually straighten themselves out. I spend a lot of my time, when I'm not working on retirement wave matters, trying to encourage developers. I've been spending the last few years on this, to create developments in very beautiful areas of the country that are underdeveloped or not developed at all, where it's possible to buy land far less expensively so that we can start putting together developments that are profitable to the people who build them, but at the same time affordable to the people coming down. I mean, it strikes me as pretty logical, but that's a lot of effort because it requires them to make a major investment in the hopes that Bob is right, and I'm trying to show it. And we're making progress, but it's slow and it's painful, I can assure you. But for the meantime, I just will not sit here anymore and just say, of course, the city is, yes, very busy, very dirty, very noisy. No, it isn't. It's a business city, absolutely, but it's turning into a tourist city, but more importantly, it's turning into a livable city. And that is, it always has been, but it's more so now. And it's not unreasonably priced, and it can be definitely priced below homes and even condos, definitely condos, along the beach areas and in other parts of the country. So give it a thought. If you really think you're seriously interested in here, get hold of me. We'll share it with you. We're not a tour group. Okay? My recommendation to most people is that if you're coming in and you're expecting to go up the coast and other areas of the country, please do so. They're beautiful areas. Take a look and see what they've got. And if you like it, great. But on the way back, if you're not entirely satisfied, and the city's beginning to sound like it might be a more reasonable bet, let me know. And we can show you what's available that we have managed to find. And if you're really willing to give some serious consideration, we're willing to do whatever we can to help you. And I like to see this because it means a more balanced nation, a more balanced community. It's just a good thing to do for everybody down here. And we all benefit from it when we have balance. We've got an imbalance now. We need to address that. So thank you very much for dropping by. I'm going to be talking more about this topic in times to come. And I just hope you find it useful. It's meant to be helpful. Thanks again.